Late at night, the frozen fish in the refrigerator suddenly spoke. "Put me back in Elysium or you all have to die." Elias excitedly gouged out the fish's eyes. He chewed them up in massive, greedy bites. This was already the 35th time he had eaten this exact pair of eyes. As long as he kept eating them, it would come looking for him. That was exactly how Bodzer was taken. To save him, Elias had no choice but to do this. But who could have known? Right on the eve of his own abduction, he suddenly received a warning from his father. "Whatever you do not come to Elysium." Arthur worked on massive cargo freighters. He ran the deep-water ocean routes. In that line of work, you averaged 8 months at sea for every month or 2 of shore leave. This time, he had come home less than 3 months after leaving. Arthur had spent half his life on the water, but ever since Elias turned 8, Arthur had absolutely refused to bring any seafood into the house. But Elias remembered that specific day with perfect clarity. It was dusk. A frantic knocking hammered against the front door. Arthur was standing outside, completely drenched. His skin was soaked raw, pale, and deeply wrinkled. He reeked of raw brine, looking exactly like a corpse that had just been dragged out of the surf. More than that, he was clutching a pitch-black bundle to his chest. The surface of the bundle was crumpled and wet. Something was squirming underneath the fabric. It was obviously holding something alive. The whole thing was incredibly unnatural. Elias rushed to ask him what was wrong. Arthur opened his mouth, then stopped. Finally, with an agonizing look on his face, he said, "Don't ask. Don't be curious. I'm doing this for your own good. No matter what I do, just pretend you didn't see it, didn't hear it." After that, he locked himself in his bedroom and didn't come out. This went on until midnight. Half asleep, Elias thought he heard noises coming from the living room. He groggily got out of bed to check. He found Arthur kneeling on the floor in front of the refrigerator. He was digging around in the freezer section, messing with something. It looked like that black bundle. The light was terrible. Elias couldn't see clearly. Then, an ethereal voice, drifting in and out of focus, suddenly echoed through the room. The route to the abyss. The vessel sailing to Elysium. Everything is in place. He is about to wake up. Elias let out a terrified scream and collapsed onto the floor. It was like he'd been hit with a massive shock. Arthur panicked, slammed the freezer shut, and scrambled back to his bedroom on his hands and knees. "Don't come for me." "I didn't do it." "Leave us alone." Elias sat there, paralyzed like he'd been struck by lightning. His brain was completely blank. That voice came from inside the freezer. What the hell was in that bundle? A mix of primal fear and morbid curiosity drove Elias to slowly inch forward, but the absolute second his fingers brushed the refrigerator door, a massive, violent force tackled him, sending him flying backward. Arthur grabbed Elias by the collar. His eyes were totally unhinged, twisted with pure rage. He screamed at the top of his lungs. "I told you to leave it alone. Why won't you listen? Why won't you listen? Do you want to go through the accident with your mother and sister all over again?" In an instant, Elias's mind exploded. Suppressed memories surged to the surface. His racing blood suddenly turned ice cold. He stopped struggling. Tears started pouring from the corners of his eyes without him even realizing it. The look in Arthur's eyes shifted, a chaotic mix of complexity and crushing grief. He finally let go of Elias's shirt. He let out a heavy, defeated sigh. Forget it. It's in the past. Elias slowly processed what had just happened. He pointed a shaking finger at the refrigerator. "What does that have to do with them?" Arthur just fell dead silent. Something suddenly clicked in Elias's head. He scrambled back to his own room. He tore through his belongings until at the very bottom of his storage trunk, he found a beat-up old journal with an Ultraman cover. He opened it with trembling hands. The pages inside had been brutally ripped out. Only a single lonely page remained. That page had originally been torn to shreds too, but it had been painstakingly taped back together, like a shattered vase full of jagged cracks. There wasn't much written on it, but the words made his skin crawl. "Mom took me and my sister to play at the beach. There are 3 white suns here, golden coconut trees, flowing silver sand, and really, really big monsters. Mom and my sister are gone. I am so scared. The monsters ate their bodies and turned them into one by one. That is so great." The childish handwriting bled with an absurd sense of a completely dislocated reality. But the most disturbing part was the date written at the top of the entry. Year 2009. Month 13. Day 4 of 4, 8th day, a time that physically did not exist. It was Elias's journal. He knew for a fact he had written those words. But why had he written them? What had he seen or heard? What actually happened at the beach that day? He didn't remember. He couldn't recall a single detail. All he knew was that in the summer of 2009, when he had just turned 8, his mother and sister vanished at the beach. They never came back. Arthur had found the journal, violently ripped it apart, and thrown it in the trash. Later, Elias had secretly dug the pieces out, taped them together, and hidden it. Not long after, both the police and Arthur told him it was an accident. They said his mother and sister had slipped and been swept away by a rogue wave. Was it really just an accident? Dad, clutching the journal. Elias walked back into the living room. All the lights were off. The freezer door was swinging back and forth, creaking on its hinges. The pale light bleeding out of the fridge looked like a dead moon. Everything was suffocatingly quiet. Arthur was gone. Elias searched the entire apartment, but there wasn't a trace of him. It was like he had never been there at all. But Elias knew for a fact he had just seen him. He pulled the freezer door all the way open. Inside the black, crumpled bundle was a dead fish, frozen, completely solid. There was nothing special about the fish. It was just a generic ocean catch. Black scales, a streamlined body, bright red gills, and a pair of pale, bulging, dead eyes. For an entire day after that, Elias didn't see his father. His calls wouldn't connect. His texts were ignored. Every single line of communication was dead. Elias was drowning in anxiety finally. He went to the police station and filed a missing person report. The officer took his statement, then shook his head. "Mr. Miller, I highly suggest you go home and get some rest. Or maybe see a doctor, Dot." Elias's expression was deadly serious. "I'm not tired." "You've been awake too long. You're hallucinating." The cop let out a long sigh. "You're even bringing up the myth of the abyss. In the old legends, the abyss is a bottomless trench somewhere out in the ocean. It's in the ancient texts. East of the Bohai Sea, millions of miles out, lies a great chasm, a valley with no bottom called Guishu. I have my doubts about whether the abyss actually exists, but I saw my dad last night. That wasn't a hallucination." Elias shot up from his chair. "I am completely sane. Everything I told you is the truth. We are very sorry about what happened to your father," the officer said, trying to calm him down. "We've been running search and rescue for 2 months. If we hear anything, you'll be the first to know." 2 months? Elias froze. The cop stared at him for a long moment. His voice dropped an octave. "Your father's cargo ship, the Dragon's Wake, was hit by a massive storm 2 months ago. The ship sank. He was lost at sea 2 months ago." Elias's ears were ringing. That was impossible. The police officer slid a file across the desk, showing him the incident reports and news clippings. "We did recover one crew member who managed to escape on a lifeboat," the cop offered gently. "We aren't ruling out the possibility that your father made it to a lifeboat as well. We are continuing the search." The facts were right there in black and white, but Elias still couldn't process it. He walked back to his empty apartment like a zombie. Staring at the vacant rooms, he called the precinct again. He managed to get the name of the hospital where the surviving sailor was recovering. Before he left the apartment, he snapped a quick photo of the frozen fish. Everything went smoothly. He found the hospital room and walked in to see the survivor. Arthur never talked about work at home. Even though this guy was his dad's coworker, Elias had never seen him before. But the second Elias walked through the door, the sailor looked at him with absolute dead seriousness as, "I've seen you before." Elias blinked, then forced a smile. "Oh, Uncle Jack, my dad must have showed you pictures, right?" "Not a picture." Jack didn't even hesitate. His tone was rock solid. 40 years ago. "You saved my life." Before Elias could even process the absurdity of that statement, Jack's next sentence made Elias's scalp crawl. Jack narrowed his eyes, studying Elias's face closely. "But, aren't you dead?" Elias let out a nervous laugh. "You've got to be joking. 40 years ago, I wasn't even born. Hell, my dad would have barely been a teenager." Jack stared at him, a deep confusion settling into his eyes. "How come you haven't aged a single day? Is this just what you look like?" "Uncle Jack, I'm Arthur's son. My name is Elias. You're Arthur's kid?" Jack fell silent for a long time. He muttered to himself. "Right. Makes sense. You probably just look exactly like him." As if suddenly remembering, Jack asked, "Did they find Arthur and the rest of the crew?" "Not yet." Elias's eyes dropped. "Out of 24 guys, you're the only one they found." Hearing that, a heavy wave of grief hit Jack. Guys who made their living on the water knew exactly how low the survival odds were when a ship went down. Elias asked Jack about the details leading up to the storm. Nothing sounded out of the ordinary. They had been running that Pacific route for decades. It was entirely routine. The only strange part was how suddenly the storm hit. When he talked about it, real fear bled into Jack's eyes. It came from the bottom of the ocean. It was like there was a monster down there churning the whole Pacific. This terrifying draft shot straight up into the sky and formed a cyclone. It felt like the ocean was being flipped upside down. And then, Elias pressed. Then the hull cracked open. The captain ordered us into the lifeboats. Jack shuddered. In that kind of chaos, I thought for sure I was leaving my bones in the water. Then I blacked out, woke up in a hospital bed. Elias wasn't ready to let it go. "Uncle Jack, did my dad do anything weird around that time?" Jack thought about it. If you want to talk about weird, it was his obsession with fish eyes. He never ate seafood when he was at home, right? But on that run, it was bizarre. He ate those things every single day. He never got tired of them. Elias quickly pulled out his phone and showed him the picture of the frozen fish. "Was it this fish?" "Yeah, exactly that one." Jack nodded. He muttered under his breath, "You two really are cut from the same mold." Elias asked a few more questions, but didn't get anything useful. When he got back to his apartment, Elias stared at the frozen fish. He hesitated for a long time. Finally, he grabbed a knife, dug out one of the fish's eyes, and swallowed it whole. He was convinced it wasn't an auditory hallucination. That fish could speak. There was something deeply wrong with it. And the facts proved he bet on the right horse. That night, exactly at midnight, the frozen fish spoke again. But that wasn't even the most terrifying part. Elias had been tossing and turning in bed, completely unable to sleep. When he finally felt a trace of exhaustion pulling him under, a whisper drifted directly into his ear. "Put me back in Elysium, or you all have to die." Elias jolted awake, instantly covered in a cold sweat. He bolted out of bed and sprinted to the living room. That ethereal, drifting voice was echoing relentlessly. "Put me back in Elysium, or you all have to die. Put me back, I'll have to die. Put me back in Elysium, or you all have to die." Elias tried with everything he had to stop his hands from shaking. He forced himself to walk up to the refrigerator. He yanked the freezer open. The fish, which had been missing its eyes, suddenly had two massive, pale eyeballs bulging out of its black sockets. They were staring right at him. It had actually come back to life. For some inexplicable reason, that stare felt incredibly familiar. Before he could even process it, the fish's jaws clamped open and shut. It started repeating that exact same phrase, over and over. Elias felt like 1,000 rusted nails were being driven straight into his brain. His head felt like it was going to explode. In a blind panic, he reached in, grabbed the fish, and started tearing into it with his bare teeth. He crushed every single bone and scale, swallowing the mangled mess down his throat. When he finally choked down the last piece of raw meat, it stopped. That god-awful voice was gone. There were no other anomalies. He didn't vanish into thin air like his dad. Honestly, it was almost disappointing. The next day, Elias walked around in a complete haze. That night, he collapsed onto his bed, completely exhausted, and fell asleep. At the stroke of midnight, he was woken up by that twisted whisper again. It sounded like someone was leaning right over him. "Put me back." Elias snapped his eyes open. A pair of pale, dead eyes were hovering barely an inch from his face. His blood ran cold, shooting straight to the top of his skull. Sitting right there on his pillow was a fully intact, pristine ocean fish. Its slimy mouth was still mechanically repeating the threat. Elias vaulted off the mattress like he'd been electrocuted. Didn't he just eat that thing? Why was it back? Then Jack's words flashed into his mind. He ate those things every single day. When he saw the picture, he said, "You two really are cut from the same mold." Was it possible that his dad had been eating the exact same fish's eyes over and over again? Thinking about that, Elias reached out, popped the fish's eyes out of its skull, fought down a wave of nausea, and swallowed them. This fish was purely evil. Over the next few days, Elias tested it. No matter how he destroyed it, no matter where he hid the remains. Every single night at midnight, it would manifest right next to him, and it would repeat that threat. Like a parasite burrowed into his bones, he couldn't run from it and he couldn't hide. He thought about how his father had been eating those fish eyes for over a month. He deduced that there had to be a quota, a specific number of times he had to eat them. And so Elias ate the dead fish's eyes for 35 consecutive days. Right as he was getting ready to swallow them for the 36th time, something completely unexpected happened. His missing father suddenly sent him a video message. Elias's heart hammered against his ribs. He furiously typed back, "Dad? Are you okay? Where are you? Are you safe?" He waited for several agonizing minutes. No reply. Desperate, he tapped the video file, praying he could find a clue inside it. Arthur wouldn't have sent this without a reason. The video started playing. It was pitch black for a few seconds. Then, the sound of heavy, bubbling water came through the speakers. A dense wall of bubbles swept past the camera lens, looking at the environment. It's obvious he was deep underwater. The ocean was an inky blue-black. The light was abysmal. In the frame, Arthur's figure, clad in a heavy diving suit, slowly came into focus. The audio was a nightmare of roaring, grinding static. Arthur's voice was frantic and broken, barely cutting through the noise. "Elias, I know you have a lot of questions, but I need you to do nothing. Just pretend none of this ever happened. Whether it's your mother, your sister, or me, you stay out of it." At that exact moment, the camera jerked violently. The water was churning. Suddenly, Elias saw something in the dark blue void behind his father. A massive, but impossibly deep black shadow was suspended in the water, vibrating and shifting. It was too far away to make out its exact shape. Arthur grabbed the camera, pulling it almost flush against his face to make sure the audio picked him up. He issued a final, utterly severe warning. "Remember, do not go looking for the abyss. Whatever you do, do not come to Elysium. The video cut to black. If you think a dead fish sitting on your pillow is terrifying, you haven't seen what Elias is about to find parked on the beach. Part 2 is where the timeline shatters and the black ship sets sail.